Do your comic book grails seem out of reach? Well, it was just a few years ago that I never thought I'd be able to afford any of mine. But over the past 2 years, I've been able to add several of my grails to my collection. And so I wanted to start up a new series to share some of the strategies that I've learned over the past couple of years so that you can also add some of your grails to your collection, like this one I just got a few weeks ago, Werewolf by Night number 32, which of course contains the first appearance of Moon Knight. I mean, if you would have asked me 2 years ago, would I ever own this book? I mean, I would have said, of course not. But yet, here it is. And I believe with the right strategies that you too can add some of your grails to your collection. I mean, after all, there's nothing special about me. I don't have a high-paying job or anything like that. Yet, I've been able to pick up some awesome books. So for this first video, I'm going to talk about something that I think probably applies to all of us who are in this hobby. And so my first tip is to start limiting the number of new comics you buy each month and take the money that you save and set it aside to start buying one of your grails. Now at first, that might sound like comic blasphemy. I mean, after all, most of us aren't in this hobby simply to get grails, but because we love reading comics. And so limiting the number of new comics you buy means that you can't read as many, right?
Wrong.
And I actually read more comics now than I ever have in my whole life, even though the only new comic that I buy each month is Amazing Spider-Man, because I just want to personally own that full run. So how is it that I'm able to read so many comics even though I buy fewer than ever? Well, I found many ways to read them for free or cheap, and today I'm going to show you the most common ways that I do that. Now, the main way that I'm able to read so many comics for free is by taking advantage of the resources offered by my local library. Of course, every library is going to be different, but most have lots of trades that you can check out. Now, you can just go into the library and browse the graphic novel section and find something you like. Or what I usually do is go to the website because there might be something I have in mind already. And our library is connected with a lot of other libraries. And so you can put in a request of a book that's down the road and they'll send it to yours. And you might have something like that. And so maybe I want to read some Batman trade. I obviously put in Batman. And then all of a sudden, you're going to see a lot of trades come up. And so let's say I want to read the first Chip Zdarsky Batman. Well, I'll go here and request a hold. And our library system, again, is pretty neat. I can have it picked up at any of these. And what ours has and I use is actually, we have a drive up, kind of like a McDonald's drive up. I don't know if yours does. So I'll hit submit. And then in a couple of days, I can expect this to be at the library and I can go online to see when it gets in. And I've read tons of comics this way. But you might be saying, well, I mean, my library has a lot of trades, but there are also a lot of comics that I want to read that they don't have. Now, before I talk about another way that I read free comics, if you haven't subscribed to this channel, of course, I'd appreciate if you'd consider doing so now. Well, the good news is that if you don't mind reading digitally, that many libraries, including mine, are connected into a larger digital library. I have one called Hoopla. There's another one called Libby. And they give you an access to what seems to be an almost infinite number of trades. Pretty much any new trade that comes out on the market ends up going up on Hoopla. And so you can see some of the things that I've been reading recently. I'm in the process of reading the most recent Detective Comics trade. Last week, I read 2 of the Something Is Killing the Children trades. I read The Last Ronin. I had to check it out a second time because I didn't finish it before my time expired. Saga, the most recent Batman. And so again, there's tons that you can find here. Now, different libraries give different levels of access to this digital library. Mine allows me to check out 4 trades a month. But I know there are some libraries that will give you unlimited access to this. So you just need to check with yours if they have a program like this, and if so, what the limits are. Now, speaking of reading digitally, another way that I have access to very cheap comics is by getting a subscription to Marvel Unlimited. And DC has their own version called DC Universe Infinite. And you can get these for about $5 to $10 a month, depending on when you get them, because sometimes they run specials. But basically, they give you access to almost the complete Marvel catalog of both new and old comics. So you can see here something I read a lot of is Daredevil. And so if I want to read the recent Chuck Zdarsky run, well, I can click here and I have access to it there. And you can also download this on the phone. That's actually where I read the comics the most because I think it's a little easier to navigate. But I can also have access to the older Daredevil comics. And recently I've been reading Born Again. And so I scroll down until I get to the book that I'm looking for. And all of this allows me to read tons of comics. I mean, back when I was buying new comics regularly, I could read about 10 a month because that's what my budget was. But now I read at least 10 a week and for a fraction of the cost. So these are just some options where you can still read tons of comics, yet save money that you can set aside to get whatever grail that you're looking for. Now, of course, there are some disadvantages to reading comics this way. First of all, if it's really important for you to actually own the book in your collection, I think that you can find it for much cheaper if you can just hold off buying it for a few months. I mean, you can kind of think of this like with cars, right? A car is a depreciating asset. Almost all comics are a depreciating asset. Obviously, you have keys that appreciate, but 99% of comics are going to go down in value. And so just like most cars, except for the classics, the keys of cars are going to go down over time, so are comic books. And so if you wait a year, then you can add these comics to your collection for half the price. Secondly, not actually owning the comics will save you a ton of space. I mean, I think one of the struggles for all of us comic collectors is finding space for our comics. Well, if you cut down on how many you're adding to your collection, obviously you don't have that problem anymore. Now, once again, there's obviously a disadvantage to not owning these comics, but life is about trade-offs, and so we all have to decide what's more important to us. Would you rather have new comics on the day that they came out, or would you rather have grails? And there's not a right or wrong answer to that question. Collect the way you like, the way you love. But if you're like me and really value grails, then I've got to accept the trade-off that I just can't get as many new comics. A second disadvantage to limiting the number of new comics you buy is that you might feel like you can't support your local LCS as much as you want to. And so what I would say to that is, if it is important for you to support your LCS, which I think is a great idea, again, it's not right or wrong whether you shop locally or on eBay or whatever it might be. But for you, if it's important to support your LCS, then I would just say, well, buy your grails there. And so they still get their money from you. And in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if their profit margins are actually higher on the secondary market than on selling new comics. Though I'm sure they still want to sell new comics and bring new customers in and all of that. But the point is that you can still support your LCS by buying back issues on the secondary market. Another downside to this approach is that you can't read the new comics on the day that they came out. You usually are going to be able to access them 1 to 3 months later, depending on what the library or the subscription service offers. And so if it's super important for you to read those stories on the day that it comes out, well, this might not be a great approach for you. But even if you're just able to hold off on a few titles, again, you can start putting away some money for your keys. And as I keep saying, there's trade-offs. For me, I'm a patient man. I can wait a few months to read these comics if it means saving, $100 a month. And a final disadvantage is that some of us just don't like to read digitally. And what I'd say to that is, again, there's just trade-offs to be had. And I really prefer to read comics in my hand. I mean, I shared this in my last video, how I love the feel of a single issue comic book. But what I love more is owning this book. And again, no right or wrong way, but if this is your goal, then you just have to limit the amount of money you spend on new comics. Because I've seen surveys that say that the average collector spends about $175 a month on new comics. Now, if that new collector even just cut their new comic buying in half, then they would be able to buy a nice copy of this in about a half a year to a year. And obviously, if they cut it even more, that they can buy this book even quicker, or other grails that are even more. Now, of course, some of you are going to be above that 175, some of you are going to be below, but you get the principle, and think about how you can apply it to your own new comic buying so that you can start saving up for these grails. Now I'm curious, what is the #1 grail that you want to add to your collection? Tell me in the comments below. Of course, if you haven't subscribed to this channel, I'd appreciate if you consider doing so now. Give us a like, a comment, help us with that YouTube algorithm. Hope this video was helpful. I really enjoyed it and look forward to seeing you in the next one.